In the quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved at a gentle pace. But for Shart Daniel Carter, a single father and local mechanic, life came to a screeching halt the day his 12-year-old daughter, Emily, died in what authorities called a freak accident at the town's abandoned quarry. Emily, a bright and curious girl, had been exploring with her friends when she supposedly slipped and fell into the water. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. At the funeral, Daniel noticed strange details that didn't add up. Emily's body had faint bruises on her arms, and her clothes were torn in ways that didn't match the official story. The funeral director, Mr. Grayson, was dismissive when Daniel raised his concerns. "Grief does strange things to the mind," Grayson said, his tone condescending. But Daniel's instincts screamed that this wasn't just grief, it was a cover-up. Desperate for answers, Daniel made a bold decision. He secretly installed a small, motion-activated camera inside Emily's coffin before it was sealed. It felt invasive, even wrong, but he had to know the truth. Days later, Daniel retrieved the camera. At first, the footage showed nothing but darkness. But as the hours passed, faint sounds emerged: scraping, muffled voices, and the unmistakable creak of the coffin being opened. Daniel's heart raced as he watched shadowy figures move around Emily's body. One voice stood out: "Hurry up, we don't have much time." The footage confirmed Daniel's worst fears. Emily's body had been tampered with after her death. But why? And by whom? Daniel turned to his younger sister, Maggie, a nurse with a sharp mind and a fierce determination. Together, they began piecing together the puzzle. Maggie reached out to a former colleague, Dr. Patel, who agreed to review Emily's autopsy report. The findings were shocking. Emily's injuries were inconsistent with a fall. She had been struck on the head before entering the water. Meanwhile, Daniel and Maggie dug into the quarry's history. They discovered that the land was owned by a powerful local businessman, Victor Hargrove, who had been trying to sell it for years. The quarry was a liability, and Emily's death had conveniently shut it down for good. As Daniel and Maggie dug deeper, they uncovered a web of corruption. Victor Hargrove had ties to the funeral home, and it became clear that Emily's death was no accident. She had stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see: a hidden stash of illegal chemicals being dumped into the quarry. When she threatened to expose it, she was silenced. The funeral home had been paid to cover up the evidence, altering Emily's body to make her death look like an accident. But Daniel's hidden camera had caught them in the act. Daniel and Maggie took their findings to the police, but they were met with resistance. Victor Hargrove had deep pockets and influence in Willow Creek. Undeterred, Daniel reached out to a journalist and Sarah Bennett, who had a reputation for exposing corruption. Together, they published the story, sparking outrage in the community. The pressure mounted, and eventually the police were forced to reopen the case. Victor Hargrove and the funeral home director were arrested, and the truth about Emily's death came to light. But for Daniel, the victory was bittersweet. No amount of justice could bring Emily back. In the aftermath, Daniel and Maggie founded Emily's Light, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting children and holding corporations accountable for environmental crimes. They also pushed for stricter regulations on funeral homes to prevent similar abuses. Years later, as Daniel stood by Emily's grave, he felt a sense of peace. Emily's death had exposed a dark truth, but her memory had inspired change. She was no longer just a victim. She was a silent witness who had spoken louder than anyone could have imagined. Justice and accountability. The story highlights the importance of standing up against corruption and fighting for the truth, no matter the cost. Parental love. Daniel's unwavering determination to uncover the truth about Emily's death showcases the depth of a parent's love. Systemic corruption. The story sheds light on how power and money can manipulate systems, but also how ordinary people can challenge them.